We thought Meeples belonged to all board gamers. It appears they don't. You don't need to be a board gaming expert to know what a Meeple is. It's not quite as ubiquitous as the pawn from chess, or Pandemic, or Sorry, or Catan, but it's close. In March of 2024, board game publisher Cogito Ergo Meeple finished a successful crowdfunding campaign for their new game, Meeple Inc. Look up Cogito Ergo Meeple or Meeple Inc. today, and you'll find that a few things have changed. First, the publisher has a new name, Cotswold Games. Meeple Inc. is nowhere to be seen either, rebranded instead to Tabletop Inc. Why? Hans im Glück. Not the traditional German fairy tale, but the German board game publisher. If we travel way back through the mists of time to the mysterious year of 2000, we'll discover that Hans im Glück published Carcassonne, designed by Klaus-Jürgen Rade. The game was a massive success, spawning dozens of expansions, big boxes, and spin-offs. Included with towering stacks of square tiles were person-shaped wooden tokens, which represented knights, robbers, monks, and farmers depending on their placement. As we all know, these wooden tokens were called Wait a second, that can't be right. Followers? Huh. In Carcassonne's original rules, the colorful wooden pieces that we all know as meeples weren't called meeples. So how did they get their name? Shortly after the release of Carcassonne, a board gamer by the name of Alison Hansel proposed that the followers be called meeples. Allegedly, when meaning to say my people, she instead said meeple. As new words sometimes do, the term found its way around message boards and was soon being used across the world to mean little wooden guys. From there, board game stores, board game reviewers, and regular old board games used the word all the time. Fast forwarding a bit to March of 2013, @Russ on Board Game Geek posted a poll to determine what makes a meeple a meeple. The majority of people agree that meeples are a thick, 2D silhouette. Meeples can be made of materials other than wood, and overwhelmingly, games other than Carcassonne also have meeples. The next notable event on the timeline comes in 2017, when Hans im Glück... I'm just going to let Tom Vassell explain it.
Hans im Glück is trying to trademark the term meeple.
2 years later, in 2019, the publisher succeeded in registering the word meeple as an EU trademark despite its widespread proliferation throughout the hobby. However, due in part to this fact and in part to publisher Simon's objections, the trademark was granted for software, phone cases, jewelry, books, calendars, cookware, and a whole bunch of other things, none of which were physical board games. Following that decision, Hans im Glück obtained the trademark in Germany, and that specific jurisdiction does include games. In addition to the word, Hans im Glück also owns the shape of the original meeple, which was first used in Carcassonne. Interestingly, although the co-founder of Hans im Glück, Bernd Brunhofer, did create the iconic meeple design used in Carcassonne, the idea of little wooden guys is quite a bit older. Top Secret Spies, also known as Heimlich & Co., is a 1984 game from Wolfgang Kramer, and it features these painted wood spies. Then Europa 1945-2030 by Leo Colovini and Duccio Vitali was released in 1998, starring wooden humans that look much closer to Carcassonne's followers. There was even a game from 1999 called Sumera by Harmut Witt, which doesn't have a ton of pictures, but you can still see a general human silhouette made of wood that's been painted. We know the past, and we know what happened in 2019, but what happened after Cogito Ergo Meeple, now Cotswold Games, finished their crowdfunding campaign for Meeple Inc., now Tabletop Inc.? On May 27, 2024, the publisher announced that due to a cease and desist email asking them to remove all references to meeples from their game, they decided to move away from my people and toward my humans, or mumins. Cotswold Games chose to think positively about the whole affair, stating that they have no desire for anyone to boycott any publishers and believe that their game will be better for the change. The very next reply names the company responsible for the cease and desist email as Hans im Glück. Board game news source Board Game Wire also confirmed that Hans im Glück was the sender of that cease and desist letter. Users on Reddit and BoardGameGeek were quick to point out that the decision to enforce the trademark this time was historically unusual, to say the least. Since Hans im Glück obtained the trademark in 2019, over 20 board games and expansions have been released by various publishers that contain the word Meeple in their titles. According to Hans im Glück's current CEO, Moritz Brunhofer, a few cease and desist requests have been made prior to this letter to Cotswold Games, mainly in the digital area. Why then have most, if not all the board games released from 2019 to 2024 using the word Meeple, moved forward uncontested? Board Games Insider, a podcast from Stephen Bonacore, Corey Thompson, and Ignacy Trebacek, had a similar question for Hans im Glück's CEO. The response from Mr. Brunhofer was, just because we did not act on something, does that mean we should not act now? Just because someone did something and got away with it, doesn't mean it's okay, does it? Mr. Brunhofer further added, many of the other commercialized attempts reached out to us from the beginning and talked to us on a basis of respect. Of course, the decision from Cotswold Games to not reach out to Hans im Glück is not necessarily a matter of respect. As Cotswold Games said themselves, we were a little surprised as the term is used so frequently. We thought Meeples belonged to all board gamers. It appears they don't. At least 1,000 board gamers were under the same impression. The incentive then could have less to do with respect and more to do with another factor that Mr. Brunhofer noted. If we do not move against it, not only will people profit from our creation without us, but also, theoretically, at some point, someone could claim that the name or shape would be theirs. In other words, if they don't take action to protect their trademark, they could lose their trademark. But again, what about the rest of the games with Meeple in their title? Some Reddit users have suggested that because smaller publishers have fewer resources, Hans im Glück can safely threaten them without risking a legal battle. While that claim is purely speculation, it could explain why games from larger publishers like Meeple Land from Blue Orange Games, Meeple Towers from WizKids, and Meeples and Monsters from AEG were able to escape with no cease and desist letters of their own. Where do things go from here? Frankly, it's unclear. Corey Thompson from Above Board TV and the Board Games Insider podcast isn't sure whether this is the beginning of a new stance toward the term, or if this particular game overstepped somehow. That's not everything Corey Thompson had to say, though. This is from Board Game Insider, episode 322.
Catalyst Games licenses Snoop Dogg and Master P's cereal brand for a new area control game.
Wrong part of the podcast there. Sorry. We're just going to skip ahead a little bit. And okay, here we go.
Out of curiosity, I looked up who owns the U.S. trademark for the word Meeple. And it turns out there's a group of eccentric gamers who own the trademark to the word Meeple.
That's right. Marion McBride and Corey Thompson are now the holders of the Meeple trademark in the US, and they will gladly allow anyone to use it for credit and candy.
I've heard the candy is very important.
While those in the United States should be safe to continue using the word Meeple in games, channels, and companies, those in the EU may want to be careful. It's possible that Hans im Glück should be taken at their word that if someone asks us nicely, we will allow the use. It is also possible that the publisher could take further action to protect their trademark of a word that they did not invent. You know, while this story will continue to unfold into the future, right now I'm wondering whether I started the story far enough in the past. You may think that the earliest date that matters is the first time someone said Meeple, or the first time a person-shaped piece was used in a board game, but I think it may go back even further. In 1812, Hans im Glück was published in Grimm's Fairy Tales. The short yarn tells the story of Hans, a young lad who, after years of hard work, wanted to return home to his mother. On his way back home, he encountered person after person who had something to trade. The lump of gold he was paid for his hard work was heavy, so he traded it for a horse to ride along the road. The horse was too rambunctious, so he traded it for a calmer option, a cow. Then he traded the cow for a pig, and the pig for a goose, and the goose for some stones, each with a problem that was solved by the next. Finally, exhausted from carrying his stones, Hans stopped for a drink. When he leaned forward to take a sip, his stones slipped away from him and down into the water. Hans didn't mourn the loss of the stones, he rejoiced. At last, free from every burden, he ran the rest of the way home to his mother. I am not telling you this to point out that the publisher, Hans im Glück, took their own name from something widely known throughout their home, but instead to point out the moral of this fairy tale. It was only after letting go of the things he thought he wanted that young Hans was home free.